Welcome to Merschman Seeds, Cup of Joe. On this episode, we welcome Dylan Stuecker to the Merschman Seeds team in his inaugural episode of our show. Hear about the soil and disease tests and field projects Dylan is working on to help better serve our customers. We have a discussion about what we're seeing in regard to nitrogen fixation bacteria and nodules on soybean roots. Ben shows a map featuring stress growing degree units from Eric Snodgrass. Stay tuned to see what Merschman Seeds product you can win.
Hi, this is Joe Merschman. Welcome to Merschman Seeds Cup of Joe. Today we have Ben, Dylan, and Ben will introduce Dylan here in just a little bit, and Turk. But before we start, I thought we'd perform a magic trick. Yeah. We've never done a magic trick before on Cup of Joe, and just want you to show that when it comes to yield, there's nothing magic about it when you plant Merschman seeds, you know. But anyhow, Ben, I have just a Dasani water, right, wouldn't you say?
Yep.
Yep. So, has the lid been tampered with or anything? Could you open it up for me?
Nope, you're good to go.
So I'm going to take this clear water and I'm going to turn it red. Okay? Watch.
Look at that.
Can you believe it?
Oh, I can believe it.
Looks like our seed treatment.
It looks a lot like our seed treatment, it does, but it's not. It's water. All I want to say is we're going to have an offer today. If any of you out there, the first 50 farmers, dealers, any combination that plant or sell Merschman seeds, if you tell us why you plant Merschman seeds or why you sell Merschman seeds, we'll send you 2 of these cups free for the first 50 people. So we encourage you, and by the way, these cups, you might see them at your local field day this year as something that you might take home. But I think you can have fun with your grandkids and your kids by doing a magic trick in front of them, just like we did today. So enough of the magic. Let's get into some of the facts and things. Ben, I'm going to let you kick this thing off today.
Yeah, so today we have our who was an intern at one point in time, has been spending a lot of time in the field, but Dylan came with us this week as his first week as our agronomy sales lead, and he's had a couple projects that he's been working on. Let's start with Dylan. Why don't you describe the project that we're working on and like kind of what we're trying to accomplish with the corn project?
Yeah, so every week we go out and we soil sample and pull tissue samples off of the corn plants, and then we send them in and get results back. And we're trying to track exactly when the corn plant is using all of its nutrients. And it's been a pretty big project. We go back to the same field locations every week and trying to get the same area of the field, so there's no, I guess, skews about it. And so now we're seeing kind of the nutrients that the corn's taken up. We're seeing big differences in like your N, P, and K, and then a big portion of your sulfur right now. Seems like it's really taking a toll on the numbers we're getting back.
Yep, so this is kind of a project that Lynn and I drummed up, and we were kind of thinking about, you know, what is the average? So we have a field that's been in strip till, we have a field that is completely conventionally tilled, we have a field that is in no-till, we have a couple variations of minimal till in there as well. And from our local area, we kind of wanted to see, okay, what's the average soil test look like? And what is that plant actually being deficient in, and what can we do to help our growers push some of these micros, push some of these macronutrients? So when you're looking at the results that you've had so far, so we started this at basically emergence, probably V1, V2 by the time that you got with us coming out of college. What are the main, let's start with the macros. What are you seeing from the macronutrient standpoint from N, P, and K? Are you seeing deficiencies? What are you seeing on those 3?
I would definitely say potassium is the biggest one we're seeing. It seems like from day one, the 4 locations, it seems like it's been low almost all 8 weeks that we've been doing this so far. And it seems like once we got nitrogen was kind of a low spot, and everyone started side dressing, and that number went up. And now we're getting towards kind of the end of the season that it's starting to use more of that. And then the phosphorus, it's been kind of steady a little bit the past couple weeks, but we've seen it slowly decreasing through the 8 weeks. So
How deep are you sampling?
we're going 6 inches, and then every week we're pulling the tissue samples off the newest collared leaf, and then right now that we're in reproductive, we're going to the ear leaf. So,
are you doing it by variety, or just in the same variety in each field, or different varieties, or?
It'll be different varieties. We probably have 2 of the locations have our 111 day 2411 C-30 in them. The other 2 locations are probably our 24A-20, if I had to speculate on that.
Yeah.
So across the varieties, are you seeing the usage the same? Their uptake is about the same?
I think it has a lot more to do, not necessarily from a variety standpoint, but we're looking at what is in the soil versus what that plant is uptaking. So we have some soils that have a lower percent base saturation K number, and that's where we're seeing some of the potassium deficiencies, I would say, in the ear leaves. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it seems like all 4 fields were not, that number is not as high as it probably should be, according to like Ag PhD or some other professionals like that.
Yep. From a micronutrient standpoint, I think this is where it really kind of gets fun. So we know that in a lot of our soils here in Southeast Iowa, we should probably be pushing, and for that matter, across the Midwest, we should probably be pushing those numbers to a higher base saturation percentage, because we are seeing the deficiency from a potassium standpoint. We are seeing the deficiency throughout the growing season from what that plant could ultimately be uptaking. But so we know we have some work to do with our customers pushing the P and K higher. The micronutrients is also kind of the one where we consistently see the same readings across the 4 different tests. Talk a little bit about which nutrients you think we need to be focusing on there.
Oh, I think a big one would be like manganese. It seems like it's been deficient since day 1 on all the locations. Even about boron, it's a kind of a big time right now, seed fill and seed size and seed coat.
Probably zinc too.
Yeah, yep. Zinc is another big one that we've seen like decreasing significantly and even deficient in our soil tissues. So.
Yep.
So how long do you plan to continue to doing this?
We'll pull this all the way through black layer.
Okay.
So we have another probably 4 or 5 weeks of this test that we're going to continue to run, and it's also a good thing. We're looking at the nitrogen in the top 6 inches. We ran the soil scan. We find a little bit of correlation from what Midwest Labs is telling us, as well as what the soil scan machine is saying.
The potash is your drought retardant, basically. So if we're deficient in potash, that makes our plants more susceptible to drought then too.
Yep. And we could definitely see that. I mean, you saw potash deficiency until we started seeing rain in the 29th of June.
Yep.
That's what I was going to ask you, if you've seen that difference in the uptake after that rain.
We'd have to go back and look, but we'll share these charts probably here in the next couple weeks. You're working on accumulating that data, right?
Yep. Working on getting everything into graphs and just kind of truly getting a better understanding of what's going on out there. So.
Yep. So from a disease standpoint, you're the one that's out in the field while I get locked in my office working on fun other stuff. From a disease standpoint on corn, you were the first one to track tar spot. I think we're going to link the tar spot map here on where everybody has seen, where we're at with tar spot currently. I noticed they threw on the 13th, they threw 3 or 4 more counties in the eastern portion of Iowa. What are you seeing when you're out in the field for disease on corn?
Yeah, I would definitely say tar spot is growing. It seems like it's all started in the lower leaves, and now that we had the kind of the cooler, wet weather that we had the past couple weeks, it's really starting to show up, and not even on the non-irrigated fields too. So that's another key thing to be looking at. Get your fungicide application right now. It's go time for that. And then I would still consider put in that insecticide. It seems like we're still seeing a lot of Japanese beetles, and even your corn rootworm beetles. I've been seeing those flying around. Those would be the western corn rootworm beetles that we would see in this area. They're a gold color with 3 black stripes, and we're seeing that a lot, especially on the corn on corn, which is, you kind of think of it when it comes to corn on corn. But then on the bean side of things, seeing a lot of Japanese beetles. That would be the biggest insect problem I've seen, the defoliation of the leaves. And then gray leaf spot on corn too. It seems like it's starting to spread too. So
Yeah, both of those diseases, like wet mornings, you have to have a certain period. I think it's like 7 hours for tar spotting and gray leaf. I think it's 7 hours of wetness, and we're getting the humidity, we're getting the dew point to hit correctly, so that we have prolonged dews. I know 2 days this week, our yards were completely white with water, so it's perfect environmental conditions for this, and there's a lot of yield potential there to protect, right?
Yep. So that'd be your biggest thing. If you got good potential right now, let's go out there and let's protect it and try and get your yield goals. So,
is there anything else you're seeing, Dylan?
Oh, I would say on the lower leaves, we're seeing kind of Septoria brown spot. It seems like it's coming up a little bit more often now that I'm out in the fields looking more. It's on the lower leaves, and then some potential Phytophthora root rot. It seems like in the wet areas that had wet feet and cool wet weather, it seems like it's really starting to show out on all the bean fields across the countryside. When you dig up plants, there's no root mass left of them, and you go on top of in a dry area, and there's a good healthy root mass. So.
Yep, we have seen a few of those fields this year where the water runs, it seems like, where that surface water, and I think we may have touched on it in Cup of Joe, but I know that there are reports from northwestern Missouri there that have seen the same thing. They were in a real dry period, and then they caught this abundance of rain which caused surface water to move, and that surface water is moving the disease with it, like what we were talking about. That disease has, that pathogen actually has a little flagella is what they call it. It's like a little tail, and it needs water basically in soil solution for that disease to move with it. And basically anywhere where the water runs, we're seeing a little bit of die off there. So be picking your RPS genes very carefully, whether they be the 1K or the 3A. Those are the ones you're going to target.
Yeah, on Phytophthora, it can hit this plant and skip 2 plants and hit another plant, or it can cover a semicircle or a circle, depending upon how much free water it is. Because sometimes there's not enough free water for it to infect each plant, but it may infect an individual plant in a row or a few in a row or whatever. But I got a couple reports yesterday too. They're seeing a little bit of yellowing at the top of soybeans in pockets, and they were asking me, what could that be? And I said, well, depending upon how much rain you had, because we've seen it a few years ago where we had so much rain that we actually had standing water, and we killed the rhizobia bacteria. And then so the nitrogen got cut off, and then they had to restart, and that takes about 30 days. I don't know if that's the case in some of the situations. I don't think we had that much rain and we could handle it, but we have seen that where you have water standing for a few days, that could happen. And that's all you have to do is dig the root up, cut the rhizobia in half, and if it's pink, it's working, and if it's green, it's not working. In other words, it's not producing nitrogen. Obviously, cyst nematodes, they're always out there, and they can cause yellowing if you have dry conditions. So anything else that potentially that potash maybe causing some yellowing? I don't know. I'm just asking you guys.
Sometimes during a rapid growth phase, like after a time where everything's kind of holding still, and then we get a nice rain, you'll see those new leaves come out, and they're lighter green, and you'll see that sometimes. And I've got calls over that in the past where they look fine, but they're lighter green. I says they're growing fast, and they're trying to get some compensatory gains going on.
And that could be what we're seeing right now, because it hasn't been that wet for Phytophthora except early, and that's when and Phytophthora favors warm conditions, Pythium cool conditions. So got to keep scouting those fields, right, Dylan?
That's right.
Yeah, there's a lot to learn out there, and I think some of the things that you're doing are really going to help us, and allows us to give more and better recommendations to our customers when it comes to maximizing those yields. So it's not magic,
Right.
It's science.
Right, and then speaking specifically to that yellow spots out in the field, Dylan and I were out digging roots, and we can show these roots here, but what were kind of some of the conclusions that you and I came up with? I mean, we're theorizing. We don't have exact data, but some of the guesses. What do you think you're seeing in those yellow spots?
I would say it seems like they had such wet feet for so long that it just simply almost rotted the root completely out. There's nothing this, you can see in the pictures, there's absolutely nothing left of the roots. Like you said, Joe, there's no nodulation going on. It is strictly just a few strands of roots, and there's brown is starting to head up the plant. So,
Do you think it's Phytophthora or is it Rhizoctonia?
No, so the field that Dylan and I were in, right out here north of West Point, when I was first getting calls from even non-farmers wondering what was going on, then I had a few farmers that were talking about what was going on. So this is my theory, and I could very easily be wrong, but the high spots in the field have, on the left side of the pickup of the tailgate, you can see they are just absolutely loaded with nodules. And on the right side of the field, or the right side of the tailgate, you can see an area where we pulled those plants that had the yellower tops or the light green tops. And they had a little bit smaller root system. I'll agree with Dylan there for sure. But they had almost zero nodules on those roots.
Yeah, and soybeans use what? 300 pounds of nitrogen. It's got to come from somewhere. They make it themselves, so that's why you don't have to apply it. So
my prediction though goes back to the prior year, or maybe even early spring, late fall, where it takes a long time for what you were talking about with that Brady rhizobia to build those populations that they need. And I don't think we had the correct conditions. Yes, we were very cool early on when these beans were stabbed in the ground the week after, a week after Easter when it was going in, but I don't think we got so warm and so dry so quickly. I don't think we had the correct environment to build those populations back up, because bacteria are just like us. They need water, they need a food source, and they have to have the correct environment to live, and I don't think that they had the correct environment in those low areas to reestablish the Brady rhizobia population. And we can turn back around and double back. We had pattern ag soil sample this field prior to, and in certain areas of this field, and it's a 10-acre grid, so it's not going to get tight down to where we actually are seeing the yellow versus the non, but there was insufficient Brady rhizobia levels, even zero in this field when they were doing their 10-acre grid. So I think it has to do with not having the correct environment for that soil to blow up the Brady rhizobia populations in the lower portions of the field. And I know we're seeing it in western Iowa. I've gotten pictures from Bill Hosfeld over that direction. We were kind of both talking about this, and this is a kind of a widespread gig. So get out there, take a look at what you have. This is one of those deals where I think, in my opinion, the amount of the lack of water, I guess, let's say, the lack of water is exacerbating so many different symptoms of what we're looking at, and that lack of water is this year, I think, because we're not seeing this at all over in the plot, and we inoculated heavily our plot. I think this would have been a year where a dry planter box or a seed applied inoculation would probably have paid off very well.
But to preface that, we did test our soil with pattern ag to check the biological activity in the soil, and we had a desert.
Correct.
And so that's why we inoculated, because we knew we had low levels or no levels, and that's something, again, that you can actually check before you spend the money.
Right, and $2-3 an acre is typically what inoculant costs. It's fairly cheap. I think you're going to see it. I don't think it's going to be huge where you're taking off, it's taking some off the top, let's put it that way. I don't think it's going to be a huge detriment when it comes to yield loss, but I think that you took some off the top by not having as thick of, you just look at the pictures, we'll put them back up. When you don't have as many of those nodules on those root systems, it's pulling back, because this is the time of year where we are starting to fill pods. We've seen pods in the bottom third of the plant that are already, 3-4 pods long, you're inch and a half, a pod that are, you're getting into that pod fill time frame, you're going to need the nitrogen to make that protein to fill the pods. So, theorizing at this point, but we're doubling back and trying to find more fields and see if these yellow spots have less nodules than the dark green out in the field.
We're good.
So,
anything else?
A little bit of slug damage showing up in southern Indiana on some double crop soybeans. They had 3.5 inches of rain, so that allowed for the moisture to come in, and we had some replant issues in southern Illinois and southern Indiana, western Indiana over there for slug damage. That's never fun. More hail damage came with rain this week, so took a few phone calls on hail damaged soybeans. In some cases the soybeans were big, some cases they were pretty small, but it's hard to look at some of those fields and make some decisions on whether we apply a fungicide. I mean, when half of the stems are broken off, half of the growing points are broken off, and in certain instances it's hard to make that call. I think we probably lost 20% of yield to some of these hail fields, so there's some difficult decisions being made there in soybeans. And then we had some nice things to say. You talk about your magic in the cup when it comes to our wheat yields in the north. So we have two customers that called and gave us testimonial that our Binti was running well over 100 bushel an acre. 110 on 2 farms is what the one customer told me is what they were averaging at a 62-pound test weight, and they are at least 7 to 10 days ahead of their neighbors. This is the beginning portion of this week for what those guys were thinking that they were.
Where was that located?
It would be western Wisconsin, southwestern Wisconsin, west central Wisconsin, something like that.
I had a local yield. One of our last seed fields to come in averaged 110.
Got a bit in the Binti.
Yep. So anyhow, it was a great wheat year. No question about it. In fact, that's 110 bushel average is the highest yield I've ever seen locally.
On seed
for
production.
a field average for seed production, yes. So, yeah, we're turning heads with Merschman wheat. There's no question about it. And I think a lot of people forget that we put turpidity on our wheat, and turpidity is a product that enhances the establishment and from the standpoint of eliminating stress and doing some things. So just when you look at wheat, it's not all created equal when it comes to seed treatments. We're doing the starting line wheat seed treatment we're using is superior to the products that are out there and the common stuff, and it's doing a lot more to get that plant off to a good start. And wheat yields are determined in the fall. In other words, your stand and your health, and that's the beginning, just like corn.
Correct. Couldn't agree more.
Anything else?
Busy week. I look forward to having Dylan with us here as our agronomy sales lead. I think we're going to see a little bit more of him on Cup of Joe and keep giving us reports on what's going out in the field when I'm being pulled different directions as well. So,
just a quick update, Joe, on the yield drought monitor map come out this week, and in spite of all the rains that we've had, we haven't did anything to relieve the drought map. So I don't know what that says for yields down the road, but USDA report come out and dropped our corn yields and kept our bean yields the same. But big week in the markets as well. Stay tuned. I think there's more fireworks to come.
After the 4th, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, we had talked about that. Ben had talked about that in a previous Cup of Joe about, locally here we were 10 inches behind, and we got between 4 and 6. We're still behind. Right. So and that was kind of common across the whole Midwest. So yeah, we got much needed rain, but we still got a long way to go.
It's going to be very interesting too when we get into that grain fill time period, if we're going to sustain enough moisture to keep that going, because we know there's no subsoil moisture to speak of.
Yep, very good.
There was an interesting comment here. I kind of forgot about it, but I have maps showing the United States talking about stress growing degree units. Mm-hmm. Snodgrass, Eric Snodgrass with Nutrient Ag Weather had on his Thursday morning minute that he shares, but it was interesting because some people talk about analog years and wondering if this year is like 2012 in any way. And he talks about stress degree days. So basically you take growing degree days, our cap is 86, and any high temperature that we have for that day over 86. So if it's 90 degrees for a high that day, you take 4 stress degree days added into that equation. And anything over 140 stress degree days typically really, really struggles to have a trend line yield or above trend line yield. Well, when you look at the map from 2012 on the left comparison to the map that we are currently sitting on the right, we're sitting somewhere in the 60s, and you can pause the video and look at where you're at on the map. But there are some areas that anything in red has over 140 stress degree days, and anything in the greens hasn't accumulated that yet. So
what happens when you get over 140?
140, that means that you've had enough heat and enough stress on that crop that it will be below your APH or below your trend line.
You're losing bushels every day.
In other words, the plant's using most of its energy to try to stay alive rather than produce yield.
Right. And we were at 150 or 160 for the first week of July. According to the 2012 map, we were already at 150 or 160 stress degree days at that point. So something else to keep in mind, when guys talk about, man, this is a surprising crop for the major lack of rain that we've had. Well, this is one of those reasons why we are as stressed as what we were in 2012.
Okay, that's good. That's good information.
Yep.
Anything else? We'll head to the corny jokes for this week.
Dylan will have to endure them for the first time.
They have to endure them for the first time. Yeah. I kind of thought maybe we would. I got one vacation joke in here because it's starting to, it won't be long. A lot of folks take vacation in the summertime with the kids and whatnot, so I thought I'd bring one of those along too. Anyhow, start with the first one. What do mermaids sleep on? What do mermaids sleep on? Think about it. Waterbeds.
Waterbeds.
Yeah, waterbeds, okay. All right. What do you get when you combine an elephant with a fish? What do you get when you combine an elephant with a fish? Swimming trunks. Swimming trunks. That summertime, And now here's the vacation one. Okay. What's gray, has 4 legs and a trunk? What's gray, has 4 legs and a trunk? Now I know, Dylan, you're thinking elephant, right? Well, you'd be wrong. It's a mouse on vacation.
Outdid yourself this week, Joe.
They're supposed to be bad. So, well, anyhow, the first 50 that give us a testimonial of why you sell Merschman Seeds or why you plant Merschman Seeds, we will send you 2 of these cups. How do you get it into us? Send it to merseeds@merschmanseeds.com, and we'll put the link up. merseeds@merschmanseeds.com. Thanks for watching today. We appreciate your business. We hope you and your family are safe, and we'll see you next week.